Before we begin today, I want to speak to the part of you that's been stretching, striving, surviving. The part of you that's been pouring into everybody else's cup while yours runs empty. I see you. You've been showing up, clapping for others, cheering them on, even while your own soul was whispering, "What about me?" This moment right here, it's for you. Because there comes a time when the noise of the world gets too loud and your spirit starts begging for silence, not to escape, but to evolve. And maybe, just maybe, God's been calling you to withdraw, not because you're losing, but because he's about to elevate you in silence. So today I came to remind you, focus on yourself, not selfishly, but spiritually, not in arrogance, but in alignment. And while you're doing that, stay silent. Let your healing be quiet. Let your growth be sacred. Let your comeback be so powerful that the world has no choice but to notice, even though you never said a word. This is your season to rise, quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. There's a moment in everyone's journey where the noise becomes unbearable. Not just the external chatter, but the internal doubt, the expectations, the pressure to be something, to prove something, to show the world that you're doing fine, even when your world is quietly crumbling. And in that moment, something deep inside starts to crave silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from isolation or giving up, but the kind of silence that says, I don't have to explain myself anymore. We've been conditioned to equate silence with weakness. In a world where everyone's sharing, posting, talking, performing, your quiet is often misunderstood. People think you're going through something tragic, something shameful, or something you just don't want to talk about. And maybe you are. But silence isn't always a sign of struggle. It can also be a sign of strategy. Sometimes silence means I'm working on me. It means I've recognized the power in being still, the wisdom in being private, and the strength in not reacting. Because here's the truth, not everything deserves your energy. Not every battle requires your sword. Not every critic deserves a response. And not every breakthrough needs an announcement. Sometimes your growth will confuse people. And that's okay. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace over performance. There is divine power in restraint. There is divine discipline in choosing to move in silence while the world waits for your next move. You see, when God is doing something deep in your life, he often does it in the dark. Just like seeds are planted underground, your transformation doesn't need an audience. You don't need to post your process. You don't need to convince anyone that you're changing. Just change, just become, just evolve. Because the loudest breakthroughs often begin with the quietest decisions. Decisions to step back, to shut up, to stop proving and start protecting your peace, protecting your mind, protecting your heart. Let's talk about Jesus for a moment. Even he in all his power often withdrew to be alone, not because he was afraid, not because he lacked strength, but because he understood the value of silence. He understood the necessity of stepping away from the crowd to reconnect with the Creator. That's strategy, that's alignment, and that's what some of us are being called to do right now. Not to isolate, but to intentionally retreat so we can hear what we've been drowning out. Silence gives you the space to hear God clearly. It gives you the room to rediscover yourself without the distortion of opinions and outside influence. In silence, you begin to realize what matters, what drains you, what fulfills you. You realize that some of the people you were trying to impress weren't even paying attention. You realize that some of the noise you were responding to was never your battle to begin with. And you realize that your value was never in your volume. It was always in your vision. But let's be real, silence is hard. Especially when you've been conditioned to be loud, when you've been raised to hustle, to speak up, to clap back, to defend yourself, to always have a comeback. Choosing silence feels like surrender, but it's not. It's a reset. It's a holy pause. It's the moment where you remind yourself, I don't need to prove who I am. I just need to know who I am. And when you know who you are, when you've done the work in silence, when you've allowed yourself to heal, grow, and release, your fruit will speak louder than your words ever could. Silence gives God the opportunity to speak into your situation without interference. It gives you the strength to move in obedience instead of fear. And when you begin to see your silence as a tool, not a trap, you begin to embrace it instead of fighting it. You don't run from stillness anymore, you seek it. You stop asking, why is nothing happening? And you start declaring, something's happening in me. This world will try to measure your worth by how visible you are, how loud you are, how many people are clapping for you. But real success, real strength, real purpose, it's developed in the places nobody sees. The late nights, the early mornings, the tears, the prayers, the journals, the therapy sessions, the boundaries you had to draw, the people you had to forgive, the habits you had to break, the thoughts you had to conquer. That's where the real work happens. So don't despise your silent season. Don't rush to be seen. Don't fear being misunderstood. Because while you're quiet, God is working. While you're silent, your strength is multiplying. While you're not saying a word, your character is being built, your mind is being renewed, and your spirit is being fortified. And when it's time for you to step back out, you won't have to announce it. Your presence will testify. Your peace will be evidence. Your confidence will be the message. They won't know what you went through. They won't know how much it took, but they'll see the glow. They'll feel the shift and they'll realize you didn't disappear, you were just getting ready. There comes a point where you have to stop looking outward and start searching inward. Because if we're being honest, a lot of us have spent years trying to become what the world wanted instead of discovering who we actually are. We shapeshift, we adapt, we perform, all for the sake of belonging. But real transformation, true transformation, doesn't happen when you're trying to fit in. It happens when you finally choose to focus on yourself. That kind of focus isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's not about becoming self-centered, it's about becoming self-aware. You can't grow in a meaningful way if you don't know what you're made of. You can't heal until you acknowledge what's hurting. You can't be strong for others until you've learned how to be strong for yourself. And that kind of strength doesn't come from pretending everything's okay. It comes from sitting with the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It comes from pulling back the layers and asking, who am I really and what have I been running from? Sometimes we get so caught up in helping everyone else that we forget we need help too. We're busy fixing things, saving people, being there for everybody else, but inside we're falling apart. And we keep telling ourselves that this is what strength looks like. But strength isn't found in constant sacrifice. Sometimes strength looks like stopping, sitting down, saying, I need to deal with me right now. And that doesn't mean you're abandoning anyone. It just means you finally stopped abandoning yourself. Focusing on yourself means asking the hard questions. What do I need to unlearn? Who am I when I'm not performing? What parts of me are authentic? And what parts were created just to survive? It means taking responsibility for your healing, not waiting for an apology, not waiting for validation, not waiting for someone to finally see your worth. It means standing in front of the mirror, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and saying, I choose me, not because I'm perfect, but because I'm worth the work. There's a reason so many of us avoid self-focus. It forces us to confront the things we've buried, the insecurities we mask, the trauma we normalize, the bitterness we disguise as strength. But ignoring those things won't make them disappear. It just delays your freedom. And you can only move forward in life when you stop dragging around what you refuse to face. Sometimes feeling looks like confronting the version of yourself you created to survive. And then choosing day by day to become the version of yourself you were always meant to be. Self-focus requires discipline. It's easier to scroll than to sit in silence. It's easier to gossip than to grow. It's easier to distract yourself with someone else's life than to deal with your own. But distractions delay destiny. And there's a version of you on the other side of self-focus that you haven't even met yet. She's grounded, she's peaceful, she's not perfect, but she's powerful. And she's been waiting on you to stop running. One of the most dangerous lies we believe is that we'll focus on ourselves later, after the kids are grown, after the degree is done, after the heartbreak wears off, after things settle down. But life doesn't wait. Your peace doesn't wait. The healing you need, the purpose you crave, the clarity you seek, they're not found in after, they're found in now, in this moment, in this choice. Because nothing changes if you don't change. And transformation isn't a moment, it's a decision you make daily. The world teaches us to keep pushing, hustle harder, do more. But spiritual transformation is different. It doesn't come through force. It comes through alignment. It comes through being present with yourself, honest with yourself, gentle with yourself. It comes from saying, I'm not competing with anyone. I'm not chasing anyone. I'm not trying to be anyone else. I just want to be me fully, freely, and unapologetically. And let me tell you something, focusing on yourself will cost you. It'll cost you the comfort of pretending. It'll cost you relationships that were built on your dysfunction. It'll cost you applause that came from performance. But what you gain in return, peace, purpose, wholeness. When you start to focus on yourself, you stop settling. You stop tolerating what drains you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop explaining your boundaries. You start honoring your intuition. You start choosing joy on purpose. You start creating a life that actually feels like yours. Sometimes we're afraid to focus on ourselves because we don't know who we'll find. But what if the version of you that you've been avoiding is the version that's actually capable of building the life you dream about? The version that's confident, healed, whole, and in tune with her creator? What if self-focus isn't the end of who you were? It's the beginning of who you're becoming. There's a shift that happens when you start to choose yourself in a sacred way. You stop operating from wounds and start operating from wisdom. You stop asking for permission and start walking in purpose. You stop showing up out of obligation and start showing up from overflow. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I like me? Because you can spend your whole life trying to impress others and still feel empty. Or you can start focusing on yourself and finally feel full. And focusing on yourself doesn't mean doing life alone. It just means doing it differently. It means surrounding yourself with people who hold you accountable to your healing. People who challenge your growth, not your worth. People who don't just clap when you win, but walk with you while you're working. Because when you focus on yourself the right way, you start attracting better. You start expecting better. You start becoming better. Not for them, not for the applause, not for the likes, but for you, because you're the one who has to live with the choices you make and the person you become. We live in a time where visibility is mistaken for value, where being seen, liked, followed, and applauded has become the currency of worth, where the world tells you that if no one's watching, then nothing meaningful must be happening. But real growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It doesn't happen when the cameras are on and the applause is loud. Real growth happens in the shadow. It happens in the solitude when nobody's checking for you, when nobody's asking what you're working on, when nobody's validating the quiet decisions that are changing everything. Some of the most powerful transformations take place in seasons where you feel invisible. It's in those moments of obscurity that God does his deepest work, because when nobody's watching, you can stop performing. You can stop pretending. You can stop carrying the pressure of looking okay while you're breaking on the inside. Solitude strips all that away. It leaves you with just yourself and your creator, and that's where the real work begins. Growth is not about becoming louder, it's about becoming rooted. And you can't develop roots when you're always reaching for outside approval. You can't deepen your identity while you're still addicted to attention. You can't build anything lasting when your foundation is other people's opinions. That's why solitude is not punishment, it's preparation. God will pull you away, not to hurt you, but to heal you. Not to isolate you, but to insulate you. Not to leave you behind, but to build something within you that can't be shaken when you step forward again. But solitude is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront the silence, the stillness, the parts of you that haven't had space to speak. It forces you to feel the things you've numbed with noise, the pain you've drowned in busyness, the trauma you've buried under achievement. But those things don't disappear just because you avoid them. They only lose their power when you face them. And solitude gives you the space to do just that, to look your fears in the eye, to grieve what you lost, to release what no longer fits, and to reclaim what you forgot about yourself along the way. We often seek validation because we're unsure. We want someone to tell us we're on the right path, that we're enough, that we're doing okay. But growth requires you to develop internal assurance, to trust your process when no one's clapping, to believe in your calling when no one's confirming it, to keep building even when it feels like no one notices. Because if your growth depends on validation, then it's not really growth, it's performance. And performance can only take you so far. It burns you out, it drains you, it leaves you empty, constantly looking for the next hit of approval to feel whole again. But when you grow in solitude, you start to realize that you don't need permission to evolve. You don't need everyone to understand. You don't need the crowd to agree. All you need is clarity. Clarity about who you are, who you're becoming, and what you're no longer available for. That clarity comes in the quiet. It comes when you stop trying to be everything for everyone and start focusing on becoming aligned with who God called you to be. Solitude teaches you discernment. When you're alone, you learn the difference between your voice and everyone else's. You stop mistaking noise for direction. You stop mistaking affirmation for alignment. You begin to filter your decisions through purpose instead of popularity. You realize that just because something looks good doesn't mean it's good for you. You stop saying yes to things just to feel included. You stop showing up for roles that aren't meant for you. You stop entertaining situations that make you shrink just to feel seen. In solitude, you develop the kind of confidence that can't be shaken, not because everything is going right, but because you've survived everything that went wrong. You start to see that the things that were meant to break you actually built you. That the loneliness didn't destroy you, it refined you. That the silence didn't bury you, it grew you. And when you walk out of that season, you're not looking for applause anymore. You're walking with authority. You're no longer available for chaos. You're not desperate for a seat at the table because you've realized you are the table. Validation feels good, but it's fleeting. You can be praised one day and forgotten the next. But what you build in solitude is lasting. It's real. It's not tied to trends or followers or algorithms. It's tied to truth. It's rooted in your identity. And when your growth comes from that place, you become unshakable. You don't need the world to crown you because God already called you. You don't need people to understand your process because you've already accepted your purpose. Growth in solitude also teaches you patience. It shows you that not everything needs to happen fast. That slow isn't stagnant. That hidden doesn't mean forgotten. That delay doesn't mean denial. Sometimes God will hold you back to strengthen what's inside of you before he reveals you. Because if you skip the solitude, you won't be ready for the spotlight. If you avoid the growth, you'll crumble under the pressure. If you chase validation, you'll always be performing. But when you allow solitude to shape you, you emerge with integrity, with maturity, with purpose, and with peace. There's a version of you that you haven't fully met yet, the healed you, the whole you, the grounded you. And she's not found in the crowd, she's found in the quiet. She's uncovered in the stillness. She's waiting for you to stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. She's waiting for you to stop proving and start becoming. And once you meet her, you'll never go back to begging for validation from people who were never meant to define you. There's something sacred about your energy. The way you love, the way you show up, the way you pour into others, the way your presence shifts a room. That energy is more than personality. It's power. It's purpose. It's a reflection of everything God has deposited into you. And when something is sacred, it's not supposed to be handled carelessly. It's not supposed to be accessed by just anyone. But for many of us, we've been giving sacred energy to people who haven't earned sacred. And then we wonder why we feel depleted, disconnected, and out of alignment. Your energy is not infinite. Your time, your emotional bandwidth, your spiritual capacity, these things have limits. And when you live like they don't, you end up exhausted, you end up burned out, you end up giving your best to everything and everyone else with nothing left for yourself. We've been conditioned to believe that being everything to everyone is strength. But real strength is knowing when to say no. Real strength is honoring your capacity. Real strength is having boundaries that protect your peace, not just your schedule. Boundaries are not walls, they're clarity. They say, this is where I end and this is where you begin. This is what I can give and this is what I no longer allow. They're not punishments, they're protection. And when you start seeing your energy as sacred, you stop apologizing for protecting it. You stop explaining why you're not available for every request, every event, every crisis. You start realizing that saying no to others is often saying yes to yourself, yes to your healing, yes to your growth, yes to your peace. For a lot of us, our biggest breakthroughs didn't come from doing more. They came when we stopped overextending ourselves for people who only called when they needed something. They came when we stopped allowing our kindness to be exploited, when we realized that love without boundaries becomes self-betrayal, that being loyal to dysfunction isn't love, it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked. But fear can't be the foundation for your relationships, because anything built on fear will eventually collapse under truth. It's not your job to be everything for everyone. It's your job to be faithful to who God created you to be. And you can't do that if you're constantly distracted, constantly drained, constantly saying yes to things that are slowly eroding your soul. Boundaries aren't just about time management. They're about identity management. They help you stay in alignment with your purpose. They help you discern who belongs in your inner circle and who's just passing through. They help you recognize which relationships water you and which ones wither you. You start to realize that not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of you. Some people are only supposed to know the public version of you, the encouraged version, the inspired version, not because you're being fake, but because access has to be earned through trust, consistency, and mutual respect. Not everyone can handle your truth. Not everyone can hold your vulnerability, and that's okay. You're not required to be transparent with people who only show up for the highlight reel but disappear during the hard chapters. And let's be honest, some of the people we're trying to keep close are the same ones draining our energy the most. They don't honor your boundaries because they were never comfortable with your becoming. They were fine with the version of you who was always available, always rescuing, always giving, but the healed you, the aware you, the version of you that says, I love you, but I'm no longer available for dysfunction, that version disrupts everything they benefited from. That version scares people who were counting on your silence to continue manipulating your spirit. But you weren't created to carry everyone's burdens. You weren't called to sacrifice your sanity in the name of love. There is nothing holy about being drained. There is nothing noble about being constantly exhausted. Even Jesus had boundaries. He withdrew from the crowds. He said no to certain requests. He chose solitude over popularity, not because he didn't care, but because he knew the weight of his assignment required rest, focus, and divine protection. And if Jesus needed boundaries, So do you. We often feel guilty when we start setting boundaries. We fear we'll lose people, that they'll be upset, that we'll look selfish. But anyone who's offended by your healing was never aligned with your wholeness. People who love you well will respect the space you need to grow. They'll adjust. They'll honor your yes and your no. They'll meet you where you are without manipulating you into staying where you've been. And if they don't, that's information. That's clarity. That's confirmation that the boundary was necessary. There's a peace that comes when you stop living at the mercy of other people's demands. When you wake up and your schedule isn't dictated by guilt. When your mind isn't spinning from overcommitting. When your body isn't breaking down from chronic stress. That peace isn't random. It's a byproduct of protected energy. It's the reward of discipline. It's what happens when you stop trying to be superhuman and start allowing yourself to be whole. Boundaries also help you discern where to sow your energy. Not every opportunity is a calling. Not every request is an assignment. Not every crisis is your responsibility. Some of the chaos you've been stepping into was never yours to carry. And if the enemy can destroy you, he'll distract you. He'll keep you busy helping everyone else become while you stay stuck in cycles of depletion. But God is calling you out of that. Not to be less loving, but to be more intentional. To steward your energy like the sacred resource it is. When you protect your energy, you show God that you're ready for more. You demonstrate that you can handle the weight of your next level. That you're not just hungry for elevation, you're prepared for it. Because the next version of you doesn't just need faith. She needs focus. She needs clarity. She needs a rested body and a clear mind. She needs space to breathe, to listen, to hear God without the interference of noise disguised as obligation. There will be people who don't understand your boundaries, who think you've changed, who accuse you of being cold, distant, unavailable. But you're not being cold. You're being cold. You're not being distant. You're being developed. You're not uninterrupted. And people who are used to your lack of boundaries will always be uncomfortable with your healing. That's not your burden to carry. You didn't come this far to keep sacrificing your peace for people who wouldn't even notice if you lost yourself trying to please them.